Hello, dear clinician. Welcome to this training on boundaries. This is something that so many of us as clinicians struggle with, and we're going into why that is, what to do about it. We're going to talk more about boundaries, what they are, what they aren't, some common misconceptions about it. And we're going to practically create a boundary for you today. So I want you to use this training very practically. This is not about being a student. You don't need to take a copious amount of notes on setting boundaries. You don't have to study this stuff, okay? I do that for you. All you need to do today is apply this from a practical perspective. So really make sure that you are walking away from this training with an actual boundary, with actual steps in your mind of this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to do it, this is why I've been struggling to do it up till now, and this is what I can do about that, so that you really can implement this in your own life. So I really just want to encourage you to do that from the beginning. Okay, so just a little history on me and why I am creating this training. So my background is as a chiropractor. I also trained as a Pilates instructor, and I worked as a clinician for about 7 years. I then transitioned to a completely new, well, I'm still working with clinicians, but a completely new career direction, which was coaching. I did my coaching certification with a specialization in sleep, stress management, and recovery. And when I started coaching, I really knew that the people that I most wanted to help were my fellow clinicians. And many clinicians struggled with the same things that I struggled with as a clinician. And boundaries forms part of that. But in a bigger sense, we struggle with knowing how to take care of ourselves while we take care of other people. So we kind of see it as a little bit of a competing commitment, right? We see it as, I really, I can see why it's useful to take care of myself, but I need to be a helper. I need to be taking care of others. I need to be there for other people. And we struggle to kind of integrate these two ideas. And I'm going to introduce you to some ideas that might help you integrate that. But I know from my own experience what those things result in, right? I was a chronic people pleaser. I was sacrificing myself at the cost of my patients and in my personal life as well. I treated people all hours of the day on weekdays and weekends, and not because I was lit up by doing that, but because I thought that that was the only way to make sure that people liked me, that people were going to come back, that my practice was going to succeed, and that I felt good as a clinician, right? I discounted fees. I did a lot of free treatments, again, not from a place of desire, but from a place of I feel like it's not congruent with helping to charge for my services. And so I felt guilty about charging for my services. I kept quiet when patients made inappropriate comments because I thought it was rude to say anything about it. And I let patients talk as much as they need to, take as much time as they need to, while I was fuming inside and becoming so resentful that they would take up my time and be so inconsiderate. So all of these things made me disconnected and resentful of the people that I was trying to help, right? So it didn't actually even end up being nice and kind to those people. And in my personal life, this also created a sense of me not knowing who I actually was, because I would just monitor other people and adapt myself to them to make sure that they're happy and they're pleased and that I'm doing what they want me to do. And so I really felt the sense of losing my sense of self, or just not even knowing who that was or what I wanted or what I needed. And so this version of me was overwhelmed, exhausted, frustrated, and resentful. And you might be feeling some of those things too. These things are very common behavioral patterns for clinicians. We tend to choose a helping profession because we already see ourselves as helpers, and we have certain ideas about what it actually means to be a helper. And then on top of that, we have a general culture within healthcare of sacrificing ourselves for our patients and being martyrs, and of not having to take care of our own health, our own well-being, while we take care of patients. We also tend towards behaviors that are associated with things like people pleasing and just having a very external orientation. In other words, we look to other people to decide who we should be. We look to other people for validation and acceptance. We are really, really scared about what other people think of us, and we use that to inform what we think of ourselves. And we have this emotional roller coaster, this emotional up and down, depending on how other people are doing, how they're thinking of us, how they're feeling. And so our emotional world is very much wrapped up in other people's lives and other people's emotions. And all of these behaviors are destructive. They are not helping us, and they are not helping other people. And I really began to understand in my own journey and those with other clinicians that putting boundaries and limitations is the way that we can care more deeply for our patients. It is the way we can be more of service for our patients. When we know there are limits, there are boundaries to our giving and our caring, we can actually relax into that and truly be the generous, kind-hearted clinicians we want to be, because we know that there are limits and we don't have the resentment. We don't have the feeling like they're controlling our lives. We don't have judgments towards them about how they're self-centered or how they are rude or selfish or inconsiderate. Right? We don't have these judgments and negative feelings towards these people when we have boundaries. And so we can learn that not only is it possible to take care of ourselves along with taking care of others, but it is actually vital to being the clinicians we truly want to be. And so before we even start the practical part of this training, I really want to encourage you to start shifting your mindset in this way. I am not teaching you boundaries so that you care less. I am not teaching you about boundaries so that you are less nice, less kind. I'm not teaching you boundaries so that you give less good quality care or that you serve your patients less. I'm teaching you boundaries for the exact opposite of all of those things, right? I know that having boundaries is going to make a massive impact on your health and your fulfillment, your happiness. But I also want you to make the shift that setting boundaries is not only for you. It's not only good for you. It's not only helping you. It is actually good for our patients and those we love as well. Okay, so when you're thinking about setting a boundary, we will go into more detail on what it actually is so that you can tweak it as you go. But for now, start to think of something that you want to be better at or better with. That is usually how people will frame it, right? So we might say, oh, I really want to be better at protecting my lunch break, or I really want to be better at not just seeing patients at all hours in the evenings and on weekends, or I really want to be better with my communication with patients, that I'm not responding to them late at night or early in the morning before I even have properly woken up, right? We might say it as, this is what I want to be better at. And so you can pick the thing that is kind of top of mind for you right now. If you need to pause this training to think of what that is for you, go for it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is why to set boundaries. And we've covered a little bit of that, but I want to go into that a little bit more. So some of the telltale signs that you need boundaries are things like the overwhelm, the resentment, the exhaustion, feeling burnt out. A big one is feeling taken advantage of. If you often say people are taking advantage of me, patients are taking advantage of me, they're taking advantage of my kindness, or when you say they're overstepping my boundaries, those are all signs that we need to work on boundaries. And the only reason we're doing that is to communicate to someone else what our boundaries and limitations are. Usually we don't communicate it. Right? We just have these unspoken expectations of how other people should behave, what they should and shouldn't do. We have certain judgments of behavior, like this is inconsiderate, or this is rude, or this is ungrateful. And then we get frustrated, like, don't they know? Like, don't they know how much time they've taken up? Or don't they know that it's my lunch break? Or don't they know that my hours are between this and this time? And we expect them to respect our boundaries. We expect them to behave in a certain way that makes sure that we are protected, that our boundaries are protected. And so that's why we get so resentful and so frustrated and so exhausted. And the other reason is that we feel like we don't have a choice. We feel like they are in control of what we do, that they get to choose our behavior. And so that's why we try and manage them, right? That's why we try and control their behavior, because in our minds, their behavior dictates our behavior. But other people have totally different rules about how people should behave, what's good and bad, what's right or wrong. And they're also not just always focused on you, right? They're not thinking about your limits. They might assume that you are going to lead the session, that you are going to lead in terms of your hours, that you will protect those boundaries, and that you will be honest with them about it. They might have that assumption. But no matter what is going on with a patient, maybe they truly are being inconsiderate or rude or selfish or whatever the case is, right? We don't know. But either way, we cannot put our own health, happiness, fulfillment, career longevity, energy into the hands of other people. We need to step into the driver's seat and we need to take control of that. Another way to think about this is it's my job to respect my boundaries, not anybody else's job. right? No one needs to respect my boundaries. I need to respect my boundaries. So the two main things that I want you to think of when you're thinking of boundaries is agency and compassion. Agency, because we're using boundaries as a tool to get into control of our own lives, to actually feel like we have agency over our own emotions, our own behaviors, what we choose to do in practice, how we choose to run our practice, that we have the choice in that. Many of us use language like, I can't, right? Like I can't exactly say no to a patient when they're in pain and they want an appointment, right? I have to see a patient if they phone and book. I have to respond immediately to their messages, right? We use language like can't and have to, and that reflects our sense of we're not actually in the driver's seat. We don't actually have agency here. And so I want you to notice how often you do that and realize that it is still a choice. Just because setting a boundary may have certain consequences and trade-offs, right? Like the patient might be upset, they might be mad, they might judge you, right? That is the potential risk and trade-off, right? But not doing it also has trade-offs, which is what you're experiencing now, right? The exhaustion, the overwhelm, the disconnection, the lack of career longevity, right? They are trade-offs to both options, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a choice. Just because your patient might be upset if you say no to them wanting an appointment does not mean that you don't have the choice. So we really want to separate that out. We get confused of like, because there might be a negative consequence, it means I have to do it or I can't do it. No, there is still a choice, and we need to recognize the trade-offs and consequences of both sides, of both saying yes to that patient and of saying no to that patient. We need to be honest with ourselves that there are trade-offs and consequences to both, but we still have a choice in what we do. Okay, and then the other one is compassion. This is to remind you that boundaries are a tool of compassion. They are a tool of kindness to yourself and to others, right? We take care of others. We're just including ourselves in the people that we take care of. We care about not disappointing others, right? We're just starting to make sure that we are also not disappointed. You know, we make sure that we are of service to our patient and that we're taking care of their health when they need us. But we're also making sure that we are taken care of and that our health is taken care of as well. So in some sense, we are starting to include ourselves as the humans that we are caring about what they think, caring about their health, caring for. We are starting to include ourselves. And that is why boundaries are a tool for compassion. But they also are a tool of compassion for other people. And I went into that a little bit, right? If we are feeling resentful, if we are feeling disconnected, if we are starting to judge people as self-centered or rude, we are not being kind to them, right? We are often just being dishonest about how we truly feel, and we are harboring negative emotions and negative judgments towards people. We need to be honest with ourselves that that is not kindness. That is not compassion. Okay, there might be some tough love in this training, but it's all in service of you. And I think that's a really good thing to remember, right? Kindness is not always about telling people that everything is just perfect and being nice and polite. Sometimes it's saying the hard thing so that we can get our butts into gear and start setting boundaries. Okay, and just a note on here, part of that agency thing is there is no boundary that you have to set. There's no right and wrong boundaries. There's no boundaries that you should be setting and shouldn't be setting. People have their own version of what they want to do. As long as there is agency, you know that it's a choice and that there is compassion towards you and other people, you can set whatever boundaries or not have boundaries to any extent that you want, right? There is no right or wrong here. If I'm messaging someone at 9 o'clock at night, that doesn't mean that I don't have boundaries. It just means that I didn't set a boundary that I'm not going to message after 9 p.m., right? There is just no right or wrong here. Okay, so hopefully by this time you've thought of an area that you want to be better with setting boundaries in. And I'm going to use the example as we go through this of a clinician that wants to start protecting their lunch break. They really want to take an hour from 12 to 1 p.m. and they want to make sure that that is protected. At the moment, whenever a patient wants to book and they only have that slot, they will just give it away, right? And so they end up working throughout the whole day. They don't eat, they don't have that rest. And so that is the area that this particular clinician wants to be better at. So now that we have our area that we want to work on, we need to get clearer on what exactly a boundary is and what it isn't. And there are many different definitions of this that you will find, but the one I like to use is that a boundary is a statement of our own behavior versus a request or an expectation is expecting something of someone else's behavior. So when we say, please don't message me after 7 p.m., that is a request. A boundary would be, if you do message me after 7 p.m., I'm not going to respond until the next morning or until my office hours or whatever the case is, right? A request might be, please come on time to your appointment. A boundary will be, if you don't come on time to your appointment, I'm only going to see you for the remaining time that your appointment was scheduled for. Or if you come late for your appointment, we're going to reschedule your appointment. I will not be able to see you at that time. Whatever the case is for you, it's a statement of your own behavior. And you may notice that it's also not just about saying no. We often have boundaries as saying no. And saying no sometimes forms part of boundaries, but that is not all that boundaries are. We also sometimes refer to it as standing up for ourselves. And yes, that can also form part of it. But typically, the only reason we would have to stand up for ourselves is because we've neglected ourselves for so long until we're so fed up and we just can't take it anymore and we finally stand up for ourselves. And that's often when our boundaries come out as quite kind of rude or mean or just very much a surprise to the other person, right? They had no idea. So when we are more practiced, when it becomes just a normal thing for us to have boundaries, to communicate those to other people, to be honest about how we feel, to be honest about what we are and are not willing to do, and we have kind of that consistency and we're not feeling drained, we're not feeling overwhelmed or resentful or any of those things, then we have very little need to stand up for ourselves. So just notice when you start to associate boundaries with either of those things. The other thing is that they do not need to be rigid. We can have very flexible to very rigid boundaries depending on what we need at that particular time, but they do not have to be rigid, which is often what people associate with having a boundary. They are also not excuses. We often tend to think, oh, you can't use your boundary as an excuse. And if you think about the meaning of an excuse, right? If I'm using something as an excuse, it means that I literally think that I should be excused from the consequences of it, right? Boundaries do not excuse you from the consequences. Like I mentioned earlier, right? There are trade-offs and consequences to setting our boundary, but there are also trade-offs and consequences to not. We are making the choice which one we want to have, which one we want to deal with, right? In any given moment. So they do not excuse us from the consequences. Okay, so start thinking about how you can take the thing that you want to work on, the thing that you want to be better with or at, and start to turn that into an actual boundary, meaning into an actual statement of this is what I am going to do, right? So for example, with this clinician, with her lunch break, her boundary might be, I'm going to take a lunch break from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. If a patient phones me and they want an appointment and the only availability I have in my lunch break, my boundary is I am not going to give that appointment away, right? Or I'm going to tell them we don't have any availability today, which is true. We don't, right? We often see that as like the lunch break is somehow different to if that was just booked up by another patient, but it doesn't have to be that way. That slot could be literally not available. Right. So that might be the boundary. I will say no to a patient when they want an appointment and the only slot I have available is my lunch break. That is the boundary. Okay, so if you need more time and you want to pause this training to really get clear on what is my boundary, how do I say it in a way that is a statement of my behavior, you can take a moment to do that. Okay, I'm going to pause here for dramatic effect. Because I really, really want this to sink in. Your boundary is always in your control. A patient or another person, doesn't matter who they are, they can never overstep your boundary. That is not a thing that can happen, right? We're not talking about abuse. That would be a completely separate situation. But in the absence of that, a patient literally cannot overstep your boundary because your boundary is a statement of your behavior. So they can never force you to do a different behavior, right? They can do whatever they want. They can be their own human being with their own emotions, their own agency, their own behavior. They have the choice to be who they are, and you have the choice to still be who you are. and who you want to be and how you want to behave. So I really want that to sink in. You are in control of your boundaries, always. And while this might feel like more responsibility, it also makes you feel far more autonomous, right? You don't feel like, oh, my patients get to decide my schedule, or my patients get to decide how I feel that day, or my patients get to decide how many patients I see. No, we get to decide that, right? We are having a much bigger sense of agency and control over our own lives. We start to step into the driver's seat of our own lives, and that has massive positive effects mentally and physically. Your boundary does not require anyone to approve of it. It doesn't require anyone to comply. It doesn't require anyone to change their behavior or their attitude or be more appreciative. Whatever the case is, it does not require anything of other people. Okay, so maybe you accept that idea, right? And you understand, okay, I know it's not the patient forcing me, but I still feel like I struggle to do it, right? I still feel like it's really hard. And that's what we're going to talk about. Why is that? So take a moment and really imagine, like picture it as vividly as you can, you actually setting the boundary that you have, that you wrote down or that you came up with. Right. So in the example that I used, if a patient phones and they want an appointment and I see, oh, the slot that I have is my lunch break, and I say, sorry, we don't have any availability today. If I imagine actually doing that, like the patient is literally phoning now and I'm saying those words, I want you to imagine that for yourself in your situation and think about what discomfort comes up. What is the resistance? What feels like the threat? What feels like, oh, I'm dreading that, or this feels so uncomfortable to think about? This is a way that we can recognize what is the underlying resistance to this behavior. Partly our behavior is motivated by going towards a goal, like we call it goal-directed behavior, right? And goal doesn't have to be like a lofty goal. It can literally mean like setting this boundary. Like I want to be better at this thing. I want to set this boundary. I want to say this to a patient, right? That is goal-directed behavior. But we also have protection-oriented behavior, safety-oriented behavior, things that are protecting us from perceived threats. And what happens is when we notice discomfort or difficulty doing a behavior, it's because these things are kind of going up against each other. On the one hand, we have this very, very sincere desire to set this boundary, but on the other side, we have this very, very sincere desire to stay safe. And when our brain perceives it as a threat, when we're doing this particular behavior, it is going to send off alarm bells. And that safety part of our brain is very, very strong, and it's very, very active, and it will win every single time until we learn how to work with that part of our brain rather than against it. So what we typically do is like, come on, man, all you need to do is just tell the patient that there's no appointment available. Like, how hard is that? What is wrong with you? Or we just say like, okay, tomorrow I'm really going to do that. Like the patient's going to phone and I'm really going to do it tomorrow. Like we just try and force our way through that behavior and try and push ourselves to do it without recognizing and getting curious about why is it so hard? Why are we struggling? What are we worried about? And if you can start to answer these questions and really get curious and like from a place of genuinely wanting to understand yourself, not from a place of you need to fix yourself or something's wrong with you or what, why can't you just do this simple thing? From a very genuine place of compassion and understanding and curiosity. Almost like you're saying to a friend or to a young child, like, tell me what's going on. Tell me what you're scared of. Tell me what you think is going to happen when you do this. And when you get clear on that underlying resistance, it'll start to sound a lot like these things. I'm worried that they're going to be upset. I'm worried that they're going to be disappointed. I'm worried that they're going to talk badly about me to other people. I'm scared that they're going to judge me as someone who doesn't do their duty as a healthcare professional, or someone that doesn't care, or someone that's selfish. Or if I do that, I'm going to feel guilty. I'm going to feel bad about myself. And I don't want to feel like that. Well, they're so nice. And they did that thing for me one time, so I should do this thing for them. Maybe you see it as an identity thing, like, oh no, I'm just a people pleaser. I can't do those kinds of things. I'm just too nice. I don't like conflict. No, I just feel everyone's emotion. So I can't stand them having negative emotions because I just take everything onto myself. Oh, I just don't like having unanswered messages. Like it just bothers me when things are undone. So I make sure that they're done. It doesn't matter what time it is, because I'm just someone that gets bothered if things are left undone. So I want you to get clear on what is this thing for you? What are you dreading? What are you scared of? In the example that I use about the clinician, maybe she's scared of if she says this to a patient, like she says, no, there's no appointment available, that the patient is going to be disappointed and that they're going to go elsewhere for their appointment, which is going to have effects on her practice and her financial situation. And for now, I just want you to take a moment to recognize that it makes complete sense that you haven't been able to do this up till now. Up until now, you haven't even been aware of what exactly the resistance is, what you're actually so scared of, what you're fearful of. Maybe you've been aware of that, but you haven't really known what to do about it. Either way, I want you to take this moment and really say to yourself, it makes total sense that I've been scared to do this. We are going to learn tools and skills to do this in a different way, but it's just important to recognize that it does make sense. All behavior makes sense, right? This is not just related to boundaries. This applies to any behavior that you or your patients are trying to do. They are competing commitments and desires that we have that are getting in the way of us doing those behaviors, even if it seems so illogical on the surface. When we look a bit further or a bit deeper, behavior always makes sense. Okay, so now you know what your boundary actually is, that it's a statement of your behavior. You know that you can actually do it whenever you have agency over it. You don't need to rely on anybody else to do it. And you also know now why it has been difficult in the past to do it, what you're actually worried about. What is that fear, that discomfort, that resistance? And often just knowing these things are already a huge step in the direction that we want to go. Sometimes just getting clear on these things already makes us take different action and allows us to change things. But I'll share with you here 3 different ideas that you can use. You don't have to use all of these, but they're just some examples of tools that you can use in order to take this a little bit further. So the first one is just building a stronger why behind setting the boundary, building a stronger reason and internal desire to set that boundary. So in the example that I use for the lunch break, right, this clinician might explore, why is it so beneficial for me to actually have a lunch break? Why is it beneficial for me to have time to rest and to actually nourish myself? What benefit is that going to have for my patients, right? How do I show up as a clinician when I'm rested and actually fed, right? And how is that also more fulfilling for me as a clinician to know that that's the way that I'm showing up in practice? I may take that to the long term, right? What would it look like if consistently over time, I'm always taking my lunch break? Like, what is that going to do for my career longevity, for my long-term satisfaction in my career, my energy, my prevention of burnout, on my overall health? Maybe I might look at exploring how can I use this behavior as me setting an example to my patients, right? My patients also struggle to take care of their health. My patients also struggle to carve out time that is for them. So by me doing this behavior, I am being an example to my patient of taking care of myself, even when it's hard, even when I have resistance to it, even when there are all these reasons not to. There's this idea of moving from being a martyr, like being a martyr for our patients, sacrificing ourselves, sacrificing our own well-being for our patients, to being a model to our patients, to modeling what it looks like to take care of our health while we take care of other people, to model what it looks like when we change our behavior even when it's hard, to prioritize our own well-being. We show them what that's like instead of sacrificing ours to help theirs. Okay, so that's the first one, to build a stronger internal desire and reason for actually setting that boundary. The second is looking a little bit closer at the fear, at the resistance. Right? So you might just explore this a little bit. Sometimes it's like this big scary monster that we like don't want to look at, and it's just this vague thing, and we like think it's scary because we've never dared to look at it. And then we actually take a look at it and we realize like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it was. It's actually this cute little cuddly monster. So what we want to do is starting to just like look at it, shine the light on it a little bit, explore it a little bit more. What exactly do I think is going to happen? Right? If I'm worried about the patient being disappointed, what exactly feels so uncomfortable about someone else being disappointed with me? Have I had that in the past where someone may or may not have been disappointed? Maybe I don't even know. And I was okay. I could handle it, right? Why is it okay for someone to be disappointed in me sometimes, right? Why is it okay for someone else to have their own emotional response, their own thoughts, their own opinions, for them to be wrong about me, and that I can still be okay? If I'm imagining that the patient is going to go elsewhere, what exactly is the worst case scenario there, right? Maybe I lose one patient, right? And if I look at the numbers, right? If I look at, okay, if I say no to one patient, is that really going to make the big difference to my practice that I'm thinking it will? And I might even look at the opposite, right? Like, how is me not taking the lunch break and always seeing a patient in my lunch break going to have certain consequences that actually end up with me seeing less patients because I'm so burnt out, or I'm so exhausted, or I get sick more often, right? We can go there with our brain. We can look at the past or other clinicians for examples, right? Like, when has it been the case that I've had to say no to a patient and they still ended up coming back? Or I had to say no to a patient and my practice was fine. Maybe there's a few examples of that. Or if you think of another clinician who does always have a lunch break, who has always a protected time for their lunch break, and they do that consistently, how do they think about this? So it doesn't really matter what specific questions we're asking. It's just that we're actually looking. We're starting to shine a light on it. We're looking at it from different examples. We're going to the worst case and we are actually planning for it. We're seeing whether we can actually handle that. And it just starts to loosen this grip that that negative prediction has on us, right? That fear, that resistance is like so strong. It's so big. It like I said, almost like out of proportion to what actually is going to happen. It creates these alarm bells. And it's not that these thoughts are, absolutely not true, or there's zero risk to it. We're not trying to like go all the way to the positive and like force ourselves to believe something that we don't. It's just to realize that that safety part of our brain is going to be overactive. And so it's going to amplify things. And so if we can just start to look at it a little bit closer, we often realize that it's not as threatening as we may have thought. It's not such a big deal. We can usually handle it. And then the third thing that you can do is to design little experiments to test out your assumptions, to test out your fears, and to gradually, in progressive steps, show your brain that it is actually safe and that you can handle it. So maybe in the example of the clinician wanting to protect her lunch break, maybe she starts off with just protecting half an hour. And that maybe is all that she can do for now. And maybe she just does that once a week. And then she progresses maybe to 2 or 3 times a week. And then maybe she progresses to completely setting aside that whole hour. But she will do it in a way that is progressive, that feels safe, and that she's just doing this little experiment. She's gathering data. She's seeing what happened. How did I feel? Could I handle it? What was the effect on my practice? And then when she's gathered a bit of data and she knows that it's not, this big threat, then she might take the next little step and the next little step. So you can design 2 or 3 little steps that you can take, little experiments, and you're not trying to prove to your brain that, that it's being dumb and that there's no threat. That is why we call it an experiment, right? You're genuinely, as a curious scientist, want to find out, is it really true? Is it as big as I'm imagining? Is it kind of, a little bit more nuanced than that? Is it not as big? And this also helps us loosen the grip of that resistance, but in a way that's curious, genuinely seeking to understand, and feel safe to us because it is progressive. Okay, so there are many more tools and skills and concepts that might be helpful here, but I really wanted to make this super practical, that you could take these things and really act on one of these things today and really go into practice the next time you're in practice, and you could actually start with setting this boundary, or one of the steps on the way to setting this boundary. The bigger concept here is something I refer to in my coaching as emotional agency. We often feel so much that we are pulled around by whatever everyone else wants, what they need, how they feel. We feel like our lives are dictated by other people's. And like I said, we also get our validation, we get our sense of self from the external world. And we want to start building a sense of emotional agency. And this agency allows us to really take care of ourselves, mentally and physically. It allows us to start spending our time intentionally, because now we know that it's not dictated by everybody else. We actually get to choose how we spend our time, how we spend our energy. We start to make time for things like hobbies and rest, spending time with our friends or people that we love, going for a run or lifting some weights, or making time for nourishing meals. We also realize that we can feel rested, we can feel confident, we can feel energized, we can feel worthy, we can feel fulfilled. All those emotions that we're wanting to feel, we don't need to wait for anybody else to supply us with that. We learn that we actually get to create that for ourselves. And that doesn't mean we don't need other humans or that we don't want human connection. It just means that we're not waiting for other people to comply with the things that we want in order to fulfill certain needs for us. We're not waiting for other people to realize our needs and desires. We're communicating them and we're learning the tools of how to actually be in control of our own emotional world so that it isn't dictated by everybody else. Having that agency in your own mind is the ultimate freedom. And this is the overall theme of my work with clinicians when we work one-on-one. I work with healthcare professionals for 6 months, and boundaries is just one of the things that we work on during that time. If you are interested in working with me as your coach, all you need to do is click the button below. That button will take you to a calendar, and on that calendar, you can choose a time that works for you. We'll set up an hour call over Zoom where we'll talk about where you're at, what's working for you, what isn't, what you'd like to be different. What do you imagine for your career and for your life? You don't need to know these things beforehand. I have a bunch of questions that I run you through, almost like a history taking, and then I will let you know what steps I think are necessary to get you from where you are to where you're wanting to go. I'll create a personalized plan that I'll walk you through step by step on this call. If those steps feels like exactly what you need right now, then we can talk further about what it looks like to coach together, the logistics, the pricing, what to expect, so that you can make a final decision that is right for you. I really hope this training has given you a different perspective and really had you thinking about why it's so important for us to set boundaries, what boundaries actually are and what they aren't, so that we don't wait around for other people to respect our boundaries and to create them for us, and that you've gotten some practical tools that you can use going forward. If you have any questions, any concerns, any help with just kind of brainstorming your particular boundary or something that you feel is a little bit sticky or a little bit difficult, you can email me at hello@drsarahcoaching.com. I will also put that email address below, but just pop me an email, tell me what you're struggling with, and I can help you through it. Thank you, dear clinician, and it was wonderful connecting with you.